Hey there, what time is it? And before you leave the office, what more are you going to have to do today? Hey, this lesson is all about time management. And before I go too far, I want to give you a number to kind of plant in the back of your mind as we go through this next video. So remember, each one of the Mastering Workplace videos, this goes 5 minutes, give you a little executive summary, give you everything that I've got, all you're going to need to go complete this assignment. Then if you have time, stay tuned, I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper, give you a couple more ideas, some stories from my own experience of how this lesson really comes in and affects us at work and at life. So this one's all about time management. Here's the number that I want you to plant and kind of curate this as we go through this lesson. The number is 10,080. 10,080. Now, 10,080, that seems like a big number, right? I mean, if suddenly you got a bonus at work of $10,080, you'd think, whoa, man, I got a lot of money. If someone said, oh yeah, we're going to take a road trip, we're going to drive around the country, the continent, the world, and we're going to drive 10,080 miles, you'd think, wow, that's going to be a big road trip. If spring is coming and you look in your backyard and you realize you have 10,080 flowers, you'd wonder what you're going to do with them all. I mean, really, if someone gave you 10,080 of anything, or actually if they offered me 10,080 of anything, before I took it, I'd actually have to stop and ask myself, well, first of all, do I want 10,080 of anything? And then obviously the second question would be, what do I do with 10,080 everythings? So here's what that number equates to. You have 10,080 minutes in a week. So one 7-day period, there are 10,080 minutes. Now, it might be easier for me, it's easier for me, it might be easier for you to think of it in a day. In a day, we have 1,440 minutes. So that's it, 24 hours times 60 is 1,440. Now here's the fascinating thing. If you think about it, 1% of your day, which doesn't seem like a lot, right? 1%. I mean, if someone offered you an investment with a 1% return, you may or may not take it. If someone showed you something that you could increase your productivity or efficiency by 1%, it may or may not be interesting. But think about this one. 1% of your day is about 15 minutes. 1% of my day is a pretty long chunk of 15 minutes. Another way to think about it is in a single day, you have about 100 15-minute blocks. Now, if one meeting starts late today, 15 minutes, it's only 15 minutes. But that was 1% of your day. If someone decides to cancel a meeting last minute, if your commute is a little bit extra long, if you get home and you're kind of tired or frustrated or you're mentally not ready to be everything you can be, if anything is getting in the way of how you use those 1,440 minutes, your time management is negatively affected. The tool that you're going to use with this lesson is a PDF. You can download this. Go ahead and do that, and then you'll take a look at this, and there are 9 areas to do a subjective grading process. It's subjective because you're going to put today's date somewhere on the top of this page. You'll look at this and you'll read both sides of the page. So on the left-hand side, there's a column of things to look at. On the right-hand side, there's a column of things to look at. Now, there are 9 areas that you're going to study relative to your time management, the way you use those 10,080 minutes in 1 week. So kind of interesting. What we'll take a look at is, for example, the first one is time. So there's a couple of prompts here. On the right-hand side, it says, I do not have a daily planning system to prioritize my tasks. On the other side, it says, I create a daily plan each morning and I reprioritize my tasks to calibrate based on new information. So one of the things that gets in the way of time management, by the way, is making decisions about what we're going to do next. My guess is you've made a to-do list. And what I want to do right here is, in this part of the video, I want to share something from a book that I read many years ago. Actually, I was given this book when I was a high school teacher. The book was written, by the way, published in 1973. So this is not something new to us. But here's the line that I want to read. And by the way, if you stay a little bit longer, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this book and one other book. So here's the line relative to time management, okay? It says, if you want to manage your time more effectively, Always set a next step. Quite frequently, a project will bog down for lack of planning the very next step. Now, whether you call this a task, a to-do, a next step, a next action, whatever you call that thing, when you're thinking about a big project that you need to work on that's going to take some time, set a next step to kick yourself into productivity. So if you can, stay a little bit longer. I'm going to share a couple of more ideas. I'm going to share one more quote from this book. I got another book that I want to share with. Make sure that you print out that PDF. Go through the assessment, and please leave some comments in the forum so we can see how and hear how and read how things are going for you. Welcome back. We're going to dive a little bit further into this idea of studying ourselves and how we use our time and manage our time. Now, if you remember from that first session, I hope that you've printed out that PDF. Maybe you've already gone through those 9 areas and giving yourself a subjective, objective score. Subjective, objective, what does that mean? Well, subjective because you're kind of picking on a 1 to 5 scale how you're feeling about that number, about that rating. Objective because you inked it. You wrote something down. Now, by the way, my advice would be maybe print 1 or 2 or even 4 copies of this sheet and fill out the guide every week for 4 weeks. When you fill out next week's guide, don't look at the one that you filled out today, right? Because what you want to do is you want to take these kind of a blind test. And at the end of a month, if you pulled all 4 of these out, then you would want to take a look at where did I score myself week to week relative to these areas of time management. I promised I would share another quote from the book that I've got here, published in 1973. So again, this is something that we've been trying to figure out probably a lot longer than that for any of you who have gone into and studied time management. Here's something you can do to really facilitate getting the most out of those 1,440 minutes. And I'm just going to read straight from the book, so there's no interpretation on my side, it's all interpretation on your side. If you use your to-do list as a guide when deciding what to work on next, then you need the long-term projects represented too, so you don't forget them at decision time. Now for me, this actually has been the reason I created 2 lists. And I remember when I was a high school teacher way back in the 1990s, I actually had a notebook and I had dueling sides of the notebook. From the front of the notebook towards the back, single line items of all of my tasks, my to-dos. And from the back of the workbook to the front, nothing else in between. I didn't take notes in this workbook. This was just my planning guide. From the back of the workbook to the front, I actually listed out the objectives that I was holding myself accountable and responsible for that time period. Now, you remember, this was quite a while ago, so it was before we had the online list managers and Outlook as robust as it is. I remember in 1998, I actually got a Palm Pilot, before they got sued by Pilot Pen. Anyway, I got a Palm Pilot and I started morphing those lists into that handheld unit, and that was kind of an interesting spin on how I could get more from my time by not having to look everywhere and have all of those things in one place. One more book that I want to draw your attention to. This is written by a friend of mine, Pete Savage, along with his partners Ed Gendy and Stephen Slonwhite. If you at all work for yourself, by yourself, if you work for somebody else, I would actually recommend you take a look at this book, even if you work inside of a large organization, a large corporation. There are 12 secrets to a great income and an enviable lifestyle. But essentially, there are 12 secrets that we need to know about working productively. And there's a section in here on how we can employ high-level, engaging prospecting. And if you remember back to the previous lesson where we talked about the importance of your social network, and we've got a couple lessons coming up where we're going to talk about some other things relative to how you work and not just what you get done. But what I circled here on the page, you can actually see I drew a big circle here, is as I was starting to think about what is it that really makes the difference when it comes to managing my time, my energy, my focus, the systems and tools that help me get more of my things done. It comes down to these several different areas. And the way that the guys wrote about it, and if you kind of think about what gets in your way of being productive, what gets in your way of performing at your high levels of performance? In no particular order, they are, for me, attention, the problem, possible solutions, proof of those solutions, and then some action that I need to take. Now, if I can take just a moment to dive into and explore these 5 different areas. The first one, attention. You know, relative to where you're going in the next 168 hours or 10,080 minutes, what are the things that you know are going to have your attention? I'm getting ready to go on a trip and I'll be gone for a week, and on that trip I'll be working with one client for 2 days in a coaching. I'll be doing a large group seminar for an organization downtown New York City. The next day I have 6 meetings planned. I plan meetings every 2.5 hours when I'm in New York City, and that way it gives me time to have the meeting and time to get to the next one. And the following day I have a couple more meetings, but it's really going to be a kind of a play day, an exploration day of the city. There's a museum that I know I want to go to. There's a bookstore that I always stop by, a local bookstore when I'm in the city. But if I take a look at that first one of those 5, attention. What is going to have my attention? What do I need to put my attention on? And what am I not going to pay attention to? So if you were in my office right now, you'd look and you'd see over on the side over here on this other desk, I've actually got in a line the few things that absolutely must get my attention before I leave my office. I'm not going to be here for a week, so those are the only ones that need to get done. I've put other things that need my attention into a different area. Now the second thing that we take a look at is the problem. Right? What is the problem? What is the time management problem? Because the further you identify that, the more clear I am on what the issues are, well then I can start to experiment. I can explore these different, as the guys talk about, solutions. I wouldn't want to try and solve something until I've really well clarified, well defined the problem. Occasionally I'll have someone call and they'll say something like, you know, Jason, we heard about the work you do. What's the solution you provide? What is the learning solution that you've come together and brought together for us? And what I have to do, and this is probably one of the reasons that we're a small company doing bespoke work for around the world, is we have to first identify the problem. What's getting in the way of people's productivity and performance? Now, if someone says, you know, Jason, one of the things that gets in our way is we are working in an environment that's very distractible. There's a lot of interruptions going on. Well, fantastic. Now that I know that the interruptions are impeding people's workflow, now I can experiment with some solutions. The fourth area was proof. Proof. Is it worth it? All right? Do I continue doing that? Now, when I think about proving something, when I think about the proof of something, I generally think about what I call the rule of 5, the 5-day experiment. And there's a website for this called 5dayexperiment.com that you can visit where I explore this and I give some examples. But if I do something once a day for 5 days, at the end of that experiment I can look back and ask myself, is it worth it? Let me try something. Let me try to prove something. By the way, it doesn't need to be 5 days, because if I try something 5 weeks, once a week, I can get some information. I can do an assessment. 5 months, once a month, maybe the 20th day of each month, you step back and look at part of your organizational system. I do have a couple of 5-year experiments. One of them I just completed year 13 on, where there's a book that I was given 12 years ago, 13 years ago. There's a book that I was given from a mentor of mine who said, Jason, you probably need to read this book. There's some good ideas there. I read the book, and as soon as I ended the reading of that, I realized I need to read this again. So I put it in my tickler file. I held it for 12 months, and it came back. And I've been reading that same book every year for the past 13 years. I just read it for the 13th time. If you want to know the title, email me and I'll send you that along with a little bit of a write-up that I've done on that particular book. The fifth area, we talked about when we're managing our time, there's 5 things that come together. Our attention, the problem, solutions, proof of those solutions, and then action. And the only thing that I'm going to amend here is I'm going to say continued action. Once I identify something that works for me, I'm going to work it. How long are you going to work it for? I'm going to work it until it stops working. Now, notice, once I work something, because I know I'm going to recycle that process, it might be 12, 18, 24, 36 months down the road when I look back and I realize, you know, the way I used to do that isn't the way that I'm going to do that based on this new idea that I have. Back to my attention, back to putting it into a system, back to thinking about that. So I want to leave you just with a quick reminder, as we saw in this book here, and if you can get a copy of this, you can probably find it at the used bookstore. That's where I got this copy. How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life. Identifying a next step, putting that on your to-do list, your task list, emailing it to yourself, putting it on a sticky note. If that task is part of something bigger, you want to have a representation of that somewhere as well. I hope you got a couple of ideas here. As soon as you're done with this video, please dive into the forum and just share with us. What's the idea you took away from this particular video on time management, studying 9 areas, back to that PDF, of what you could look at that if you tried something, if you did something a little bit different, if you brought in some information, if you met with someone and had a discussion, what might you try a little bit different to see if you can get a little bit more, move further a little bit faster. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to hearing your comments, reading your comments, seeing your comments. Talk to you soon.